Let's start with that idea that a prison officer could be murdered, which sounds like hyperbole.
Well, Phil, we have seen so many horrific assaults against our members and become dramatically close to that. One that springs to mind is a horrendous assault at Swansea Prison using a makeshift razor. He was actually very close to being a massive victim. And I've got to say, we've been beating the drum on this now for the last 12, 13 years about resources, overcrowding, assaults, the lack of pay rises for our members, especially those members that have been in the service a long, long time. They're actually been treated like second-class citizens.
Right.
And I can elaborate on that
and we will come to that, but just you think that unless things change, you're going to lose an officer will lose their life in a British prison.
Yeah, it's not just me saying that. The Justice Select Committee had done a survey most recently in the findings. I think Sir Bob Neill is very well respected by all political parties, actually. That survey that he'd done involved over 6,000 prison staff. And the findings from that were 50% feared the violence of going to work. And that's in most of the jails up and down the country. He actually summarised it by saying that it was a ticking time bomb that the government needed to get to grips with.
Right. So, within that horrific picture that you've painted there, you put that down to overcrowding, lack of staff, lack of experienced staff. Is that it?
But there's several other issues. I mean, we've now got a pension age of 68. Prison officers have got to work to the age of 68. But all those issues that you just mentioned, and let me take you back to 2010. So the reality was, in 2010, there was a mass cull of experienced prison staff that meant in 2012 there was an exodus of over 8,000 prison officers.
A whole load of experience.
So that was a massive load of experienced staff. Now, the top grade of prison officer, which is now known as the closed grade, was on a salary of 28,600 back in 2010.
Right.
In 2013, if they sign over into fair and sustainable, because they've had pay freezes, they've had actually 18% pay rise over 13 years, which means they're only on 34,000. So the reality is they can't retain staff, and even experienced staff feel that lack of respect now within the prison service.
OK.
That they will leave.
Justice Secretary Alex Chalk is due in front of MPs tomorrow. He's going to be grilled about prison overcrowding. What should MPs ask him?
I think what the MP should ask him is that, and I think it's a bit unfair on Alex Chalk because he's only just come in to being Secretary of State, but it seemed to change Secretary of States more than I changed my underwear, quite frankly, because over the last 13 years, we've had no fewer than 9 Secretaries of State. But getting to the crux of the question, I would seriously get MPs to ask him, because they came to our parliamentary reception, cross-party MPs. They could not believe that prison officers had a retirement age of 68. They couldn't believe that the attrition rate was now about 14, 15%, whereas back in the year 1990-odd, it was less than 2%.
Well, listen, was there ever a time, was there ever a golden age in Britain's prison service? Was there ever a time when officers were able to do their jobs well and safely, and criminals were less likely to reoffend? What, if there was a time, what changed?
I think the change came with all the cuts. As sure as eggs are eggs. That's
you'd
what
have to
happened.
be a bit more specific than that. Which cuts?
Well, the cuts and the austerity measures from 2010 onwards.
Right.
We've not recovered from it, and I don't think we will. And I think Sir Bob Neill knows that. And whilst they started to invest in prisons, they've had that cull. 8,000 prison officer jobs went.
Right. So what would you change?
I would change the whole concept of professionalising the job, making it an attractive job once again, lowering the retirement age to 60, the same as police officers and fire service, make the remuneration package far superior than it is.
Make it a more attractive
proposition. And then have a royal commission, not just into prisons, but the whole criminal justice system.
Thing.
Because everything has a knock-on effect from policing to the courts to prisons.
Let's bring our panel in on this, because I see you, Tessa, you've been.
I have been keen, because when I was about to leave university, I did a history degree, and there's a lot of focus this week on useless degrees. Well, there I was with my history degree, and I thought maybe I could go on the acceleration scheme, where you start as an officer and you look to become a governor. And so I did work experience in Shepton Mallet Prison, and then I did the drug rehab stint. And so I did a sort of full 360. And in the end, and this ties into two things, I thought, goodness, I'm going to be more locked up than the prisoners, because actually they have a sentence, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. But it seemed to me, once you were in the system, and then I hear that they don't get to retire till they're 68. And even then, and this was in the mid-1990s, there was talk of overcrowding. But there was about 40,000 prisoners locked up. How many prisoners are locked up now?
86,000.
So that's one of the big problems, is we put more and more folk in prison.
And they've only got 300 spaces left before...
Across England and Wales.
Yeah, because they're locking out Operation Safeguard.
Natasha Clark, what would you change?
I think, you make a really good point about the funding. That, we know that the Ministry of Justice is one of the biggest, victims of the austerity measures. And I think, the problem is that the Conservative Party obviously have, wanted to toughen up justice, lock more people away, toughen up sentences. And the problem is that they haven't put in the money to match that to the prison estate. And, like you say, I was looking at the prison statistics just on Friday. I cover this as part of my job. It was I think 700 on Friday, and now it's now 300. These 20,000 prisoner places that the Justice Secretary has promised just isn't going to go far enough. You read report, I'm sure you read them too as well, report after report after report about the awful condition that our prisons are in.
The problem is it's never going to be a vote winner, is it? Look after the officers and the prisoners. Nobody's going to tick that box.
No, but the problem is that obviously, once you have these people in prison, you need to rehabilitate them before you get them out again. Otherwise, you're just going to go on to reoffend, and that reoffending bill is already so huge. It really needs to be looked at again as part of the round.
Are we actually putting too many people away? Are we locking up too many people?
There is an argument to that, because some of the mentally ill people in our prison shouldn't actually be in prison. They should be diverted away from prison. But it's fallen on the toes of prison staff then to look after mentally ill people that they're not trained to look after.
So is it me, or is there just a whole theme here across the last year where our public sector in Great Britain has become terribly run down, underpaid, underappreciated? Prison service, schools, doctors, nurses, train drivers, you name it.
And
it
if you think of it, which is going to come at the bottom of the pile of priorities for Joe Bloggs and the general public? The prisons. Because we need a bus, we need a doctor, we need a school. We don't think that we need a prison. We could look maybe at the campaigning tabloid papers and maybe change the tone of the coverage.
I think
the lock 'em up and flog 'em bit.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of the British public want to see. They do want to see tough sentences. The Conservative Party have understood this, and I think they understand that that is what people want. And, you poll people again and again and again, and that's very popular with the public. It's what they want to see.
Except that, when you do a bit of Googling and you find out that Norway's prison service consistently regarded as being the best, low levels of recidivism. Now, Norway, of course, is ridiculously rich. Are prisons a problem that we can safely just throw money at?
I actually think, to be honest with you, we've got to change the narrative in this country from all political parties. Because under Howard, you had the let's get tough on criminals. Under Blair, tough on the causes of crime, all that sort of stuff. They use prisons and crime as a political football for votes. But the reality is, it's my members that are faced with opening the doors of overcrowded prisons, underfunded prisons, and both, it's not just the Conservatives, Labour have been guilty of it as well, with the cuts and so forth. But the reality is, we need an honest debate in this country about what we want to see from our prisons and rehabilitation.
Even the chaplain at Shepton Mallet Prison...
You have to make this very brief.
Yeah, even the chaplain at the now-closed Shepton Mallet Prison, he said it wasn't just prisoners that came and wept, it was prison officers. OK, that's given us all lots to think about. Steve Gillan from the Prison Officers Association, thank you so much.